You ever feel like you're just running on autopilot, kind of stuck in the same old patterns day after day? Well, in this explainer, we're diving deep into Joe Dispenza's incredible guide. It's this amazing blend of cutting-edge neuroscience, quantum physics, and meditation, all put together into a really practical roadmap for rewiring your own mind. We're going to unwrap the core concepts, look at the science behind it all, and even get into some exercises that you can start using like today to really reshape your life from the inside out.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Our roadmap for this journey is broken down into 4 key parts. First up, we're going to explore some pretty mind-bending science about how your thoughts can actually shape your reality. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how you can rewire your brain. After that, we'll walk through a really practical 4-week meditation plan to put everything into practice. And to wrap it all up, we'll look at what it means to truly embody this new self in your day-to-day life. Sound good? Let's get started.
So let's kick things off with Part 1, Understanding Your Reality. This section is super important because it's where we lay all the scientific groundwork for everything that comes later. We're going to be looking at some pretty wild ideas from quantum physics and exploring just how deeply our environment and even our own bodies program us to be the people we are today.
So, to start, Dispenza builds this fascinating bridge between ancient wisdom and modern science with a concept you might have heard of, the observer effect. Now, this comes from the famous double-slit experiment in quantum physics, and in really simple terms, it's this totally wild discovery that the tiny, fundamental particles of our universe actually behave differently when they're being watched. I mean, how crazy is that? And this isn't just some quirky science fact. Dispenza argues it's actual proof that our consciousness, our awareness, plays a real role in shaping reality itself.
Okay, so what's really interesting here is the contrast between 2 completely different ways of seeing the universe. On one hand, you've got classical Newtonian mechanics, this idea of a predictable, clockwork universe. But on the other hand, you have quantum theory, which says reality is really all about probability. In this quantum view, energy actually comes before matter. So think about it. If our thoughts are a form of energy, then that means they have the real potential to influence the physical world. This is the big leap, right? It's why Dispenza challenges us to start seeing ourselves as these powerful, energetic beings, not just, flesh and bone.
So when you boil it all down, the foundation for everything else in the book really comes down to these 3 key takeaways. First, particles respond to observation. Second, our thoughts aren't just these fleeting, invisible things. They actually emit real, measurable energy. And third, our consciousness and the physical world are deeply, fundamentally tangled up with each other. You'll want to keep these ideas in your back pocket because they're the scientific basis for how all this personal change is even possible.
Think about it. From the moment we're born, our environment just starts imprinting itself on us. We absorb family beliefs, social norms, cultural values, you name it. And Dispenza argues that because of all this, most of us end up living in this really narrow little comfort zone, just replaying the same familiar behaviors over and over to fit in. He says this conditioning is basically an invisible fence that keeps us from reaching our true potential.
He explains that we have these things in our brains called mirror neurons, and they're literally designed to fire when we copy the emotions and actions of other people. It's a huge part of how we learn for sure, but it's also how we lock in those automatic habitual patterns. So the real key to breaking free, and this quote just nails it, is to consciously distance yourself from those knee-jerk reactions. It's all about creating that little bit of space to pause. Notice what's triggering you, and then actively choose a different, more empowered feeling.
Okay, this next part is a huge idea in the book. Dispenza basically says that your body becomes an emotional autopilot. It can get biologically addicted to the chemical patterns of whatever emotions you feel most often. Seriously, think about it. If you're chronically stressed, your body gets totally used to those constant spikes of cortisol. If you get angry a lot, it starts to crave that adrenaline rush. And over time, these chemicals become your new normal. And your body will actually subconsciously seek out situations to keep getting its fix.
So for our brains, time is kind of an illusion, right? It's almost always living either in a memory of the past or an anticipation of the future. And Dispenza explains that by constantly dwelling on past regrets or worrying about all the future what-ifs, we're chemically and neurologically anchoring ourselves to the same old ways of thinking. And that's why real, genuine transformation absolutely requires learning how to be present right here in the now.
So how in the world do you create a new future if you're so stuck in the past? Well, this is where mental rehearsal comes into play. The whole idea is to vividly imagine your desired future self, engaging all your senses in the process. And what's so incredible about this is that your brain really can't tell the difference between a real, actual experience and a super detailed visualization. So when you do this, you literally start building new neural pathways as if you've already lived it.
You're priming your mind and your body to accept and create that new reality.
All right, so we've just covered the science behind why we get so stuck. Now, let's move on to part 2. This is where things get really practical. We're going to focus on the actual tools and processes you can use for rewiring your brain, and we'll be putting a big focus on meditation as the key to unlocking all this change.
So Dispenza breaks down this whole transformation process into 3 really logical stages: thinking, doing, and being. And he connects these to different parts of the brain. You've got your neocortex, that's your thinking brain, which is what learns new ideas. Then there's the limbic brain, your emotional brain, which processes feelings and experiences. And finally, the cerebellum is what automates behaviors until they become totally second nature. True, lasting change, that only happens when a new skill moves from that conscious learning phase, where you have to really think about it, into unconscious competence, where it's just a natural part of who you are. Now, he calls the space between who you are right now and the person you could be the gap. And he says we need to stand in that gap with curiosity, not with fear. To get across it, he gives us 3 pillars. First, you need a clear intention. That's your focused thought on what you want. Second, you need an elevated emotion, something like joy or gratitude, which basically charges up your brain's circuits with positive energy. And when you combine that clear intention with a really powerful positive emotion, you start to broadcast a whole new signal into the universe and begin to bridge that gap.
What's cool is how Dispenza demystifies meditation by connecting it to these actual measurable brainwave states. So, when you're awake, alert, analyzing things, you're in beta. As you start to relax and focus inward, maybe during a light meditation, you shift into alpha. But the real magic, he says, happens when you get to theta. That's that deep relaxation, twilight state. This is where you can bypass your analytical, critical mind and get direct access to your subconscious to reprogram old beliefs. And then finally, you have delta, which is just that state of deep, dreamless sleep.
Okay, so all of this science and theory we've been talking about, it all leads us right to the core of the practice in part 3, a super practical, step-by-step, 4-week meditation plan. This is designed to take all these ideas and put them directly into action, guiding you toward creating a completely new destiny.
Week 1 is all about building self-awareness. The main exercise is to become conscious of your unconscious self, your automatic thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Then, when you're in meditation, you just observe these habits. No judgment. You're like a neutral witness just watching them float by. And the reason this works so well is that the simple act of witnessing from a detached perspective starts to strip away their power. It just weakens their automatic grip on you.
Now, Week 2 is all about interruption. The best way to think of it is like pruning a rose bush to encourage new, healthy growth. So when one of those automatic negative thoughts or feelings pops up, you consciously interrupt it. You can do this just by taking a few deep breaths and actively generating an elevated emotion like gratitude. What this does is it breaks the neurological loop. You know how they say neurons that fire together wire together? Well, by consistently interrupting that old pattern, you stop those neurons from firing together, and that old connection just starts to weaken and fall apart. Then we move into Week 3, which is all about release. This is where you dive even deeper into the emotional memories that are fueling your old identity. The main tool for this is what he calls a gratitude flood meditation. You basically recall things you're genuinely thankful for until your body literally registers a chemical shift. A change from stress hormones like cortisol to more positive ones. And while you're holding that amazing elevated state, you then mentally release all the outdated beliefs and emotions that are tied to your past. You're just letting go of what no longer serves you.
And that brings us to Week 4. It's time for installation. So after clearing out all the old stuff, you now get to actively wire in the new. This is where you bring back that mental rehearsal we talked about earlier. You visualize your desired reality in super vivid detail, but, and this is crucial, you have to emotionally engage with it. You have to feel the feelings of success or health or joy as if they were already happening right now. It's this emotional charge that programs your subconscious to accept these visions as real, lived experiences. And that's what starts drawing that future right to you.
So after all that internal work, the meditation, the visualization, we finally come to part 4. And this part is all about taking that new internal state you've built and making it a permanent, real, demonstrable part of your life in the outside world.
Just like the quote says, the transformation isn't really complete until you embody it publicly. This is the moment where all that internal work has to meet the external world. It means you start acting in alignment with your future self. Dispenza really encourages you to let your actions, your life itself, do the talking and show the changes you've made.
And this is where people who do his work report these incredible, tangible results, like getting new careers or healing broken relationships, all because they started living as if their future was already here.
So, where do you go from here? Well, to deepen your journey, the book suggests a few next steps to support your practice. You could try daily journaling to track your progress, maybe find some breathwork apps or ambient music to really enhance your meditations, or even team up with a friend for some accountability. And hey, if you want to dive even deeper into the science of it all, he recommends books like Rita Carter's Mapping the Mind or checking out the work of Greg Braden on heart-brain coherence.
Look, at the end of the day, breaking the habit of being yourself isn't just a one-and-done thing. It's a continuous process. But as we've explored here, the whole argument is that with disciplined practice and some genuine curiosity, the potential is really there. The potential to reshape your brain, your body, and your destiny, one thought and one feeling at a time. So the only real question left is the one right there on your screen.